Good morning, guys. It is Friday, and right now, actually, at 8 in the morning, there is a Dota match that people were excited to watch because it is between Secret and Navi, and a very popular player, Dendi, is standing in for Secret, who was a player that was on Navi for many, many years, so he's basically playing against his old organization. So I decided to wake up slightly earlier to watch it, just 8 o'clock. I normally wake up at 8:30. I checked the schedule and Virtus Pro plays in like less than 2 hours. So that kind of makes me sad because it feels like so long since Dota 2 has had matches to watch. The next tournament is, I guess, 2 weeks technically. It's not on the Dota 2 Pro circuit. So it's just some independent tournament that ESL is hosting, and I'm not a fan of ESL, but if they have the best teams there, then I will watch it. These other minor tournaments are just hard to keep track of because I feel like unless you regularly browse Twitter or have notifications from them, then you will be more aware as to when there's a good matchup coming. The only notification that I get off Twitter nowadays is Artifact, and I still cannot believe they haven't announced beta. Okay, so the other day I talked about this book because I just received it in the mail and I wanted to go read it out in nature. And as expected, this was a very, very fast read. It's only, how many pages? 230, that's it. Most of the lessons in this book were things that I generally already knew, but I think I mainly wanted to read this book to kind of know more about her and her lifestyle and maybe her relationships, because random curiosity, right? So I didn't actually read this book to try to improve my life, although I will say that when I read her segment about foods and eating healthy and eating from locally grown produce from farmers markets, that part kind of randomly struck me, and then I had a lot of motivation afterwards to buy from the local farmers market. Shane did tell me a while ago about Sprouts. I think it is a supermarket that only gets their produce from local farmers. So luckily Sprouts is part of Instacart, which is what I use to deliver my groceries. I decided to just buy a bunch of vegetables and I bought a bunch of fruits. Basically, I think I'm going to try again to at least completely, generally, clean out my diet. So I don't consider myself ever having had a very poor diet. I just think that at times when I have cravings, I probably should have more self-control over that. This week I bought like pears, I bought more apples, bananas, raspberries, I bought grapefruit, I bought grapes. I just remembered when I was living in North Park at my last apartment, every Thursday they had a little farmer's market thing on the street, and then I remembered going there a few times and I bought some nectarines and I bought some other fruit. I forget what the name was. It was something I had never heard of, but every time I went, the nectarines I got were so delicious, and I just realized that when you can expect it to taste that good, you just have so much motivation to eat them. And that's just something that I always feel like is an issue, where if you buy it from regular supermarkets, sometimes it just feels so bland or it's not that delicious. It's kind of just okay. So throughout the week you lose motivation to eat it and then you end up trashing it, and I don't really like that. So when I realized this flip of like actually really wanting to eat a fruit as a snack, then I was very surprised by that. And I really do enjoy having that mentality towards fruit because, you know, it's a very good snack and definitely keeps me away from having cravings for other stuff. So even though it's only been a few days, I am pretty excited to think about continuing to buy from local farmers. So reading this did help me to, I guess, better understand and prioritize what the healthy diet brings you. I don't tend to associate healthy foods with my energy levels or just like how tired I feel at times. To be honest, at times it is still very difficult for me to make that association. I do know though that there have been times where I would be very, very tired when I didn't want to be, and that always agitated me because I'm not really a fan of napping, because I feel like if it's my free time, I would much rather spend it doing an activity I like instead of sleeping more. I'd say another thing that I found very interesting that I think I'm starting to see more a little bit, whether it's through celebrities or whatever news that I'm reading or whatever stuff that I'm reading, is that people are starting to understand better why it's important to only have valuable people in your life that you really cherish and that are people that value you. I'm actually very glad that I learned this very, very long ago, although I do think that I take it to the extreme compared to most people, but that doesn't bother me because that is my preference. Everybody has their own personal preference as to what they find valuable in somebody else and whether they want to keep them around. So for me personally, I really don't want somebody around if they ever feel like they are kind of using me. So that tends to be a lot of people. It's just kind of nice to read about other people realizing that more, because I feel like when I started being more critical of people, I've always kind of felt a little bit judgmental or overly critical, and maybe I am, but I always felt like maybe I wasn't being fair to these people by dropping them. But nowadays, or for the past few years at least, I have definitely been way more comfortable with how I am. I don't really feel bad about that aspect, so I like that I've reached that point, because I think when you tell other people something honest, like, you know, I don't have many friends because nobody is reliable, they tend to think that the problem is you. Maybe the problem is you, but if you are happy, it's not really a problem, right? I just found that part to be pretty interesting. And I guess this game is not really retaining my interest. It's still going on right now behind the camera. So I might just go into work. Well, good afternoon. It is Sunday, and this morning started off very well because there was this minor tournament. It was called the Autumn Main Brawl, I think. But anyways, I think it was mostly only EU teams, and Virtus.pro was playing a best of 5 this morning, and they won 3-0, so I woke up at 9 in the morning to watch that. And then right after that, for today, I just had the idea in my head that I wanted to drive out to Verona Reservation and play fetch with Riley because it has been a while. So immediately after that ended, I took her over there and we played a great round of fetch. She turned out to be very tired. At the beginning of this recording, you heard her drinking a ton of water. Now that I'm home though, I think I really want to go for a joyride. It's still 3 o'clock. Still plenty of time in the day for wonderful sunrise, and she definitely needs her break. She needs to rest and sleep. So it would be a great time to go out for a ride, and I didn't go last weekend, so I think I will. But also another thing that I'm really excited to talk about is that I finally decided that I wanted to try a horseback riding lesson. So these past few days, I just happened across some horse movies. I think last week I watched Spirit again. It's one of my favorite animated movies of all time. So that one always makes me very emotional to watch because Spirit is one of my favorite movies since I was a kid. When I was a kid, we had the VHS for it, and that was the period of time where I really, really loved horses, but my parents weren't willing to spend the money to let me do horseback riding lessons. So I guess whenever I think back to that time and my love for horses and how even now at the age of 27, I still have never taken a single horseback riding lesson, does kind of make me sad, because whenever I think of my childhood, I think of my parents stifling my interests, and even though it's been a very long time and we're on good terms now, it still makes me sad to think about it, because I think about how they were so willing to spend a lot of money for me to take private lessons for violin and piano. Both of those per week, per kid. They did that for both me and my brother for so many years, and that's really fucking expensive. I don't know, over $100 a week for sure for both of us, because we were taking private lessons for half an hour and then it eventually became an hour. Just to imagine that they were willing to pay for that and not pay for an interest that I really had, just it bothers me to think about at times, because it's like a weird idea that parents don't want to see you happy or something. I'm sure it was more like they had no idea anything about horses, so since it was a whole world that they were never involved in, they feel like it's a pointless thing to spend money on, even if your child has interest. But for instruments, they always told us that it was something that they wished they had done when they were kids, so that's why they spent so much on it for us. But you know, the weird thing also is that paying for us to take instruments was never something that they wanted us to do as an adult or something. They never gave me the impression that this was going to be some sort of career for me. So even if it is a valuable skill to have or a very interesting thing to be taking lessons for, it was just a crappy period of time for me, because I really didn't like playing the instrument, especially when forced to practice for an hour a day per instrument. So there were so many times I wanted to quit, but they weren't willing to let me quit. So just whenever I think about wanting to take horseback riding lessons, I just think about how my parents weren't willing to spend on something I really liked, but instead forced me to continue doing something I didn't. And just sometimes I just wished I had more support from them as a kid. Anyways, after that backstory, I watched Seabiscuit yesterday and I watched Secretariat a couple days ago. So both of those movies had a lot of horse stuff in it, and I loved seeing it. I love everything about it. The thing is, though, I'm trying to be realistic, where I've never taken a lesson before, so there is a chance that I might not actually even enjoy it, but I find that highly unlikely. So I decided to sign up for a private lesson on Wednesday. I have to do it in the morning before I go into work, because if I don't, then I can't go next weekend because of Utah, and the weekend after that just feels like so far away. I wanted it to be sooner, so I am so stoked to be able to do this. I have never done anything super hands-on with a horse. I've done trail rides before, and I don't like trail rides because it feels like it's on autopilot. You're not doing anything with the horse. The horse is just guiding you. So lessons will be much different, and I'm super, super, super happy that I finally decided to do this, because this is something that I've wanted ever since I was a kid. I guess we'll see whether I like it or not, if I am willing to continue taking lessons. It's just a very difficult decision for me to make, because private horseback riding lessons are super expensive, right? This 1 hour private lesson on Wednesday is $75. So even if I bought a package, they will discount it a little bit, but it's still a lot of money for me to be spending. And I do have other things I want to consider, like, you know, if I don't control my spending, or if I don't take control of my finances now, it's gonna really push back the time period when I can buy a house. So those are other things I will have to factor into it, but for now I don't want to think about that, because it just depends on how I feel after the lesson, how passionate I am about it. I think if it's something I really enjoy, then maybe it would be worthwhile for me to continue with it and find other aspects of my life to sacrifice when it comes to money. But anyways, I have been standing here talking long enough. Wow, I'm still sweating. And I'm not the one that was running, Riley was. So, okay, I'm gonna get ready and then I'm gonna go for my joyride.